So that done, and those that deserve to be recognized having been recognized, we now move to what we might call the nitty-gritty. The substance of this conference is now in better focus, as we would like to invite Mr. Jonathan Goldner, Chief Executive, Asia and the Middle East for APM Terminals Management, Singapore. And this is on the subject of global and Indian subcontinent outlook for the maritime logistics industry. So, here's Jonathan.
Thank you, Governor, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, esteemed dignitaries. It is a true honor and privilege to have been asked to speak here tonight. I can say on a personal note, Sri Lanka is certainly one of my most favorite countries to visit. Always loved coming here, and I can say that after I've gotten to spend the last days here this week, I'm going home later tonight, even more bullish on the country. I've been very invigorated with the people I've gotten to meet this week and speak to, and I look forward to see the next steps for this country. I'm also grateful for the long partnership Maersk and APM Terminals have had in Sri Lanka, and likewise for our long partnership with J.H. Keels. I've been with Maersk for over 27 years, about 2/3 of that. I've had the privilege to work over Asia and Middle East. Most of this time has been with ports and APM Terminals. And I can say what I love most about my job is really the values. Two stand out to me: uprightness. That means doing things the right way. And then the other value is people, and really caring for people, both in the company but outside the company. I love traveling and seeing the interactions of economics, geopolitics, technology, assets, and people. And then if you operate a port and you invest in ports, you're really in the middle of it all. I'm humbled to be leading APM Terminals here in the region. And likewise, I think, with there no doubt many challenges that we've talked about these past hours, certainly there are also plenty of opportunities. So APM Terminals has over 64 terminals around the world. We're actually the largest operator of transshipment hubs also globally. I'm proud to say that the World Bank ranks ports by efficiency every year, and 6 out of the top 10 ports in this survey actually were affiliated with APM Terminals. The industry is immature, and there's no doubt there's a lot of friction throughout. We see the opportunity to help countries really in 4 ways. I think primarily it's about being resilient, and it's about bringing stability and operational excellence to a country. It's also about connecting a country with the rest of the world. Here we're proud that we have over 2/3 of our business comes from other shipping lines besides Maersk, and we look to grow that moving forward. It's about providing first-class infrastructure in and around the ports, and it's also about growing the best people in the industry for helping the communities that they operate in. We believe, for these reasons, in looking across the industry, that there's an opportunity to lift standards, and we humbly want to be a part of helping to do that. I think operating a concession, it's a big responsibility. It's a privilege, one that we take very seriously. And I can say what gets me out of bed every morning when I go to work is getting to visit the places that we do business and see the impact that we can make on people's lives. It's a true privilege. So what I want to talk about today is really some key trends that we see in the industry. Likewise, the challenges, but more important, I think, the opportunities. And here, again, I'll come back to the theme of lifting standards. So I believe there's 6 key trends that will help shape the terminal and port industries of the future. Many of you in the room, I'm sure, are familiar with them. We've spoken of some today, but let me put my own color on them for the next couple of minutes. One thing I'm confident is that global trade and patterns will continue to go through significant changes and shocks as we go through the coming months and years. Here, again, through this, I hope we have an opportunity to reduce friction and improve trade. So let's talk about these in depth. The first is geopolitics. All around the world right now, we see change. I'm sure we will continue to see more. It's been nearly a year since ships have started diverting around Africa. We believe this is unlikely to change anytime soon. We see many multinationals are moving towards a China plus one strategy in their sourcing models, and this is, of course, increasing trade through new countries and likewise causing shifts across trade lanes. We see significant changing dynamics in the Middle East, large growth in the GCC countries, particularly Saudi, and we see the exciting new land bridges that are beginning to connect countries and continents that weren't connected before. No doubt there's been a number of elections and political changes these months. We'll continue to see that, not least here in South Asia. In the U.S., of course, we're all anxiously looking at the outcome of that. It's been a large shift of voter sentiment. There seems to be unity in the country. However, certainly there are many unknowns that remain exactly around the foreign policy and the trade policy that will unfold over the coming weeks and months. As a shipping line and a port operator, we believe that there will be certainly a volume surge in the coming months leading up to the tariffs. We've seen some have been announced. No doubt changes to sourcing patterns. And I think what will be most interesting, of course, is to see how different countries react to the changes that are coming in U.S. policy. So what does that all mean for ports from an operational perspective? I think the first thing to notice is despite all the change we've seen through COVID and what I've just spoken about, trade has continued to grow, and we have survived the shocks. What that requires is both carriers but also terminal operators to be agile and resistant. Volume will shift, it will continue to shift, and ports will continue to be shock absorbers as that happens. We've seen a great example of that here in Colombo, as again ships rerouted around Africa, and the port step up to help absorb that shift in trade. We need people to be upskilled and available to cope with volume surges that will no doubt come, and of course we need to use technology to better plan around the supply chain. How about for investments? I think here we'll see certain port investors will need to reassess their portfolio and perhaps adjust it as risks and geopolitics change. We made our own decision to actually exit Russia. We were the biggest port investor in that country and exited after the invasion of Ukraine, as one example. We also see new and different competitive forces in play for concessions. We'll see, no doubt, new blocks of countries formed, and it will be interesting to see how they align. How will that in turn play out with who operates a concession for a country? We'll see increases in platform agreements between countries. We've entered a couple ourselves recently. And it will also be interesting to see how capital is deployed. There's plenty of money available, but when a country takes that money, one has to ask what's the real value that it's getting for it, and what strings may or may not be attached. The industry will no doubt continue to evolve. We've seen global terminal operators trying to expand their existing footprints. We've seen regional players grow and likewise try to expand globally. We've seen vertical integration across logistics and shipping companies. We see some terminal operators even buying feeder operators and logistics companies. And we see some carriers investing more in terminals and ports than they used to, I suppose because, as we talked about earlier, there's a lot of cash right now. And likewise, ports are shock absorbers, and they're a critical part of ensuring network resilience. It's also the first round of the original build, operate, transfer model globally. So here, governments will have a choice. As a terminal operator and investor, we believe, depending on how these agreements are structured, we want to make sure there's good incentives to continue to invest in the remaining term of a short-term concession. With all the changes going around the world today, it's important to do that more now than ever. Our belief that assuming a good track record and a good partnership, in most cases we think the incumbents will continue to be a government's preferred choice. It's important, again, that we give the opportunity to continue to invest for the good of the country. And likewise, I think with all the changes going on, why would one to risk additional change? Climate and ESG is also a major trend. So extreme weather is increasing. We heard some great examples today from our colleagues from Bangladesh about how that country is dealing with it. A worst-case forecast calls by around a 4 times increase in damage from storms to ports by 2050. This, of course, increases construction costs. It creates the need for redundancy, and it will also, no doubt, create additional shocks to what we just talked about. Once more, ports will be the ones that are required to absorb it. At APM Terminals, we're making sure to make our terminals more resilient to extreme weather and always putting the safety of our people, partners, and customers first. In terms of decarbonization, 7 of the top 10 players have net zero targets by 2040 to 2060. Here, there's a high degree of variation in the initiatives supporting these targets. Technology is luckily improving rapidly, and we expect costs to decrease in this field as we move forward. We're proud to have started, together with DP World, ZEPA, that's the Zero Emission Port Alliance. We now have 11 members in it, and its goal is twofold. One, to work to improve standards in battery electric port equipment in the industry. Today, there are few, and we want to make sure that costs come down, things are standardized so it can get to markets quicker. We also have taken the onus upon us to try to learn from each other with the only goal of sharing best practice across those members and sharing it with other ports so we can move quickly. At APM Terminals, we plan to be net zero by 2040 and have reduced our emissions by 65% already by 2030. It's coming through 3 ways: electrification, efficiency, and also sourcing clean energy, which we talked about before. I think there's a real opportunity for that here in Sri Lanka. We're committed to making the future of global trade more sustainable. Let's also touch on digitalization, processes, and technology. No doubt, another trend. So as I said, we believe the port and terminal industry is still quite immature, especially when it comes to standards and process. They're few. We see rapid changes in technology right now. The supply chain desperately needs visibility to be able to plan, see, and react to all the shots that I just spoke of, and will no doubt continue. There are over 4 billion pieces of paper in circulation every day as a part of moving global trade. That's crazy. Terminals can play a role here, both in terms of providing first and last mile visibility, helping connect the industry around a port with port community systems to remove barriers for trade in that port itself, and likewise, given its ports sit in the intersection of trade for a country, helping to see waste, connect people in the industry, and remove that waste. For terminals, there's also a significant change in technology that was coming that will increase efficiency. Here, it's about how do we better plan vessels in the yard as ships get bigger. It's about optimizing how equipment is deployed. It's about having predictive maintenance using AI to ensure the cranes are always working so we make sure we keep the economy moving. And it's about using digital twins to better plan across ports and see how ships depart and arrive to make sure waste is taken out. Cyber attacks will also continue. We see thousands of them every day at our company. No doubt, we think this will increase, and as a part of being resilient, we need to make sure ports that we operate and others operate or stand up against those. We also believe that there's huge room for improvement in standardization and operations. At APM Terminals, we're in year 8 of implementing Lean. That's all about getting the front line to working with management to understand where there is waste in the system, cut it out, and have people on the front line a part of making tomorrow better than today. The 5th trend I'll talk about really is around the carriers' changing needs. This is particularly true as it comes to ports that are transshipment hubs. So looking at the current order book, even larger vessels are being ordered right now with the average size around 13,000 to 18,000 TEU. Former vessels that were once plying the east-west trades will be now further deployed to north-south, East Africa, the Gulf, India, and Inter-Asia. Infrastructure, of course, is critical to make sure that these markets are competitive and able to handle the tonnage in an efficient way. I'm proud that in our two terminals in India, we just upgraded our terminal in Mumbai to handle the biggest ships in the world. We just completed that around 2 months ago. And likewise, in Pipavav, we're building out a new LPG berth to bring in gas for the country, which is what it needs, and likewise have a major renovation for Ro-Ro to move cars out of India to the rest of the world. I think it's important that ports and governments have a plan to deal with these changes, both in terms of being ahead of construction to avoid customer impact, ensuring there are incentives in place to make sure that it actually promotes new investment from industry, and likewise making sure that supply and demand is matched in a good way. We also see significant changes in shipping alliances, which is somewhat related to what I just spoke about. Here, we'll have a major new alliance formed between Maersk and Hapag-Lloyd with the Gemini Alliance, and we have a major new alliance with O&E, Yang Ming, and Hyundai called the Premier Alliance. Although smaller than the last major reshuffle, this will no doubt create significant changes in networks over the coming months, and once again, ports and terminals will be the ones that will need to step up and absorb these changes to make sure that these changes are good for the countries that the ships are operating in, and to happen efficiently for the lines that are making them. Here, for Maersk and Hapag-Lloyd, the hub terminals have a particularly important role to play. So the whole point of this network, to make it more efficient, you heard this 90% reliability mentioned earlier, it's actually about removing the number of ports on each side of the chain, because whenever you have a port, you increase the risk for variability and delay. So on the big ships that call east-west, they'll call fewer ports, but then of course that will mean more transshipments in a few select hubs to deliver the network. What does that mean once more? The success of this will come down to hub terminals, most of the big ones that we operate, and how we can ensure efficiency for the network. I think once more this is an example of how ports will become an even more important part of global trade as we move forward. So in closing, just a few final words. So no doubt we will see changes, significant changes, I'm sure. Some are unknown, but I'm confident that if we look past the challenge, there will be ample room to find opportunity. APM terminals, for our part, we will humbly try to lift industry standards and create industry standards to help this succeed. At the end of the day, it's about being a country's preferred partner, because I said it's a privilege to operate in the countries that we do, and it's about being recognized by shipping lines as offering the best product. So with that, I wish you a very successful conference and certainly look forward to speaking with you all tonight. Thank you very much.